couple of my YouTube peers have recently been having a friendly chat with a woman who doesn't seem to understand what criticism is. She's a writer, apparently, so I'm sure that will go well for her. It's gone so well, in fact, that now I feel compelled to respond to her. Edinburgh and some dumb American were rather nice as far as I'm concerned. I more than likely won't be. But bear in mind if you do see this young lady. Being harsh with criticism is not harassment. If you think it is, you are a moron. If you want to be a successful writer, you are going to have to grow a thicker skin, rather than overreacting to some quite small YouTubers analysing your ideas and pointing out the flaws. If you think there are no flaws in your ideas, you are a moron. Nobody has perfect ideas. They can always become better, more fit for a particular purpose. I want you to understand that this kind of criticism is not going to go away, and the more you try to silence it, the stronger it will get. If you really are a writer, then you must read. So read about the Streisand effect. That is what happens when you try to shut down those who oppose you. I and many others would be happy to go back and forth with you on these ideas, but if you continue to dismiss everything negative as harassment, you will never grow, and you will be a shit writer. Finally, if you think videos like this are profiting from your work, you are a moron. Fair use. It's a thing. And when it comes to criticism, having your work on display is necessary for context. However, nobody is coming to this video under the illusion that I am you or wanting to hear your unfiltered opinion. They are here for mine. You are just a springboard, a wall to bounce ideas off. If I wasn't using you, I would use someone else, or I would just do a full-length monologue much like this one. Today, you get both. That out of the way, let's take a look, shall we?
First off, please let me say that I don't speak for all black people.
Then isn't this all kind of pointless? You are literally saying this is how you should write people of colour, to not be offensive or to be inclusive, or some other such nonsense. For the sake of people of colour. But if you don't speak for them, how do you know what you are saying affects them, or will be what they want out of an author's work? You're kind of undermining your whole spiel here with this one sentence. I approve.
Here's the simplest tip. It's kind of weird to describe brown characters' skin colors with terms like coffee or caramel and so on.
Why? I thought you were a writer. People use things for comparison literally all the time. And I can't really think of more pleasant things to be compared to. I mean, I do fucking hate coffee, but the smell is lovely. And it's usually a pleasant colour. Anyway, when I think of a caramel man, I think of this dude. Oh my god. As usual, the caramel man is being controlled by the white man inside his belly. Humans specifically use food to describe things all the time. Because, and I don't know if you know this, humans quite like food. They kind of need it to function. And many foods, at least at this point, are kind of universal. So it's easy for me to say it was the colour of milk chocolate, and someone instantly gets an idea in their head of what kind of colour I'm talking about.
That would be like if I described pale skin as like butter or coffee creamer or milk that had been left out too long and slightly discolored.
But people do describe white people with foods. You moron. You never heard of someone being described as milky white? Seriously. Or as a cracker? What? That's a different thing. Oh. But seriously, have you ever used the words before? It's not just about people's skin. Claret, eggshell, hazel, lime, olive, plum, saffron, and on and on. I truly don't understand why a writer would want to limit the use of something that is used to describe basically everything, just because it's being applied to a specific group of people as well as everything else. Sounds kind of weird and racist, doesn't it?
The only time any character should describe another with food terms is if they are a cannibal.
No. Any writer should use any and all tools at their disposal and discretion to paint the best possible picture they are able to. And authoritarian dipshits like you should be ignored when they tell people what they can and can't say with their art.
Next, don't include people of color as props for your main character. It's really obvious and a bit unnerving if the only diverse characters in your story are your white main character's best friends in an otherwise large and expansive world.
A lot of stories are focused on 2 to 3 characters, and those characters tend to be the ones who get names and that get a description of their appearance, because it might be, relevant. We don't describe every single infinitesimally small detail of a character who doesn't matter to the plot. It would be weirder still to go out of your way to point every time you are putting a diverse character into your story, even if they don't matter to the story. It screams to me of pandering. And I think even you would find it obvious when someone is just trying to win brownie points for more diversity. If I was writing a story about a honky with 2 person of colour friends and they interacted with an ancillary character for a moment, I wouldn't even think to bring up their race. It's weird. The only white people I know who are obsessed with the colour of people's skin, you probably guessed it, they're racists. If all you think about when interacting with someone is the colour of their skin and basically nothing else about them, you might be one too. So how about you let people write the characters they want to write and that makes sense for the world they are building.
It's even more frustrating if said diverse character dies to further your main character's story, even if they are conveniently replaced with another brown friend.
That would be pretty strange. And the only type of person I could imagine doing that are people trying to pander to you.
That doesn't mean diverse characters can't die, but it's important to consider the implication of minorities dying for a white character's growth, even and especially if your story claims not to have the same oppressions as our real world.
Are you saying books can oppress people, or are you saying that they perhaps shouldn't include things that happen in reality? It is really hard to discern what you want to say, because especially from a budding writer, you don't seem to write very well. To be honest though, I know the real reason you write like this. I don't think you know what you actually want. You're probably one of those people who advocate for change, but when pressed, you can't articulate what that even means.
It's really important to be aware of racist implications, even if you're writing a science fiction or fantasy novel with characters with blue, green, or gray skin. Just because the colors don't match doesn't mean the same issues fade away.
You do know that one of those space aliens of colour could actually be the space crackers. You don't have to be white to be privileged.
A character of color is still a character. They deserve to be treated and developed as well as any other character you'd write about.
As long as they are important to the story, but everyone, including the whites that are tertiary characters, can in general be all but ignored. Would you really expect someone to tell you what each individual in a crowd the main character is navigating looks like? Because that would be fucking tedious to read, I'll tell you that for free.
If you're writing about a brutal world or an oppressed society, someplace on the brink of war, it's fine if everyone is treated terribly. You're not going to get accused of racism if your POC are treated just as bad as everyone else.
So we can't write about slavery because what? Really, this is what you seem to be saying would mean. But it doesn't make any sense. That was a thing that happened. Why shouldn't people, or at least people you deem, why shouldn't they write about a thing that happened? Can you come up with a reason that isn't racist or completely idiotic?
It's when your characters of color are consistently the ones treated worse than anyone else that you'll start to have issues.
Yeah, there you go. No stories about the slave trade. Brilliant. That's dumb. You're dumb. We all know you would lose your shit if everybody stopped talking about the slave trade. That would be oppression, etc., etc. I honestly think people like you are always trying to feel oppressed, no matter what people try to do for you. It's actually kind of sad.
Racial oppression is steeped in so many different intersections, it's really difficult to dissect in fiction.
So let's not bother. Instead, let's focus on equal treatment in reality and telling good stories in fiction. Good? Good.
The last thing you want to do is play the white savior trope, which is exactly what it sounds like, implying that people of color don't have the tools, education, or strength necessary to save themselves is never cool.
I agree as a generalization, but what of specific characters? Are you not allowed to write an incompetent POC, only incompetent whites? Doesn't that again sound fucking weird and racist? And I mean specifically to people of colour. You appear to be saying that they are so fragile to see a character in fiction who isn't a perfect shining beacon of humanity. It seems you can't write a character that is, dare I say it, a person.
I really don't want to tell anyone what to write or say that you can't write the story of your heart.
Oh, good one.
But it's important to consider if the story you are trying to tell is built around an experience that isn't yours to tell.
I'm sorry, do people own parts of fiction now? I didn't get that memo. Shall we fire every person of colour writer on a predominantly white show? Or at least limit what they can write to the characters who look like them? Because that sounds fucking barbaric to me, and anyone else who can brain. I really don't think you understand the implications of anything that you say that you want. I think you would create a world far more oppressive than you even think it is right now. And not just to the people that you want to stifle. It will affect everyone, including you. You have to let everyone write what they want to write, paint what they want to paint, sing what they want to sing. Because when it comes to art, total freedom of expression is so unbelievably important, and any attempt to take that away from anyone, white, black, brown, luminous purple, or whatever, should be fought as staunchly as possible.
Stories involving slavery, segregation, internment camps, they're very hard to get right.
So we just shouldn't bother, right? It's not like there's ever been a good, important thing made that involves them. No, certainly not by some filthy gringos.
I'm not trying to make you feel guilty for things your ancestors did, but
I am not my ancestors, and neither are you. We have no obligation to them in any way, shape, or form.
understand that the consequences of these things are not over.
The only consequence are all the things that every one of us benefit from every day, including you. It absolutely fucking sucks that human beings in history lived brutal lives all over the world. Some of them still do. But for your average Western citizen, literally everything in their lives is orders of magnitude better than it was even 200 years ago.
I can trace my mother's genealogy back to the Revolutionary War, but my father's records are much harder to know. I know his last name matches a plantation, but even recent information is damaged by families pulled apart or records not given as much care as my other relatives are.
So you have a bit of difficulty tracing your ancestry. This speaks to an issue of someone raised desperate to know it, but what of someone who just doesn't care? What impact is that going to have on your life going forward? People obsessed with lineage always baffle me, especially those with so-called great ancestors who did big things. Who cares? I mean, it's a fun factoid, I guess, but what impact does that have on your skills, abilities, your character? It doesn't mean anything. Struggling to trace one's genealogy smacks of a first world problem of the privileged.
Racism even feeds into a diverse author's ability or opportunities to write. As you know, when I was homeless last year, my biggest fear wasn't living on the streets, but that doing so might erase me from the publishing landscape.
That is the weirdest thing I have ever fucking heard. When homeless, you weren't bothered by not sleeping under a roof, not being able to properly take care of yourself, but you're being erased from the publishing landscape? What the fuck? You have the most fucked up priorities I have ever heard. I have been homeless. I spent a year like that. It was the most difficult phase of my entire life. I felt lost, abandoned and alone, both by society and those close to me, and every day was a constant fear that something was going to happen to make my life even worse. I either couch surfed or I just didn't fucking sleep that night. I was very, very fortunate to not have to sleep on the actual streets, but every day I was on a knife edge in that regard. But the last thing that even occurred to me was, what about my singing career or TV or whatever? I struggle to believe that your homelessness was anything worse than staying at your friend's house. You know what? I need to know. We're going to find this fucking video. I need to know what a homeless person who worries about their fucking writing career looks like.
Unfortunately, the title is not clickbait. I am homeless. Well, I guess not yet, but in 2 days I will be. In 2 days, on October 1st, we have to be out of our house, no matter what, and we'll be living in a camper.
Are you kidding me? I wanted to give you the benefit of the doubt, but no, you lived in a camper. That was your fucking home. You were houseless. Houseless. You didn't have a brick and mortar house. Fuck me. You know what though? I agree. It sucks, that situation, but it wasn't homelessness. What you are doing is appropriating my life experience as a man of homeless that actually spent many nights without a roof over their head, not sleeping because I was too fucking scared, and absolutely no sustained residence. I am offended by the use of the word homeless. You need to stop using that word until you have lived that experience. And you definitely can't write about it. See, I'm clearly taking the piss. But yeah, I now know why you didn't worry about sleeping on the streets. It's because you weren't homeless. Homeless people don't have places to live.
Every day I face my computer with deep anxiety that I'm not educated enough to write as well as my peers. And I'm so neurotic about money that I feel guilty for buying myself anything.
Do you think any of that makes you in any way unique? Because it doesn't. You have just described what it is like for anybody without a surplus of money and aspirations of creativity. For God's sake, you really need to get over yourself.
I'm obsessive about learning about writing and investing in my career because I'm terrified that I don't have enough to make it work.
I don't really understand what you could possibly need outside of a laptop and an internet connection. All you need to learn how to write is read a lot of stuff and write lots of stuff. Degrees, fancy bullshit might help, but then it might actually detract if you're not the right kind of learner. But experience always helps, no matter who you are.
These worries are likely familiar to most writers, but for me they are deeply entrenched in ways I've been let down before.
It's like you genuinely think a white person could not have had a worse life than you. It's insane. You have to let go of this idea that privilege has anything to do with race, at least in the West, and everything to do with the amount of money you have. Everything. Or do you ascribe to the completely ludicrous notion that a young, wealthy black woman has less privilege than a destitute, homeless, aging white man because reasons?
Stories that deal with the consequences of racial oppression head-on are almost always going to be more accurate and genuine from voices that have lived these experiences.
Stopped clocks and all that? Yes, experience is a great way to learn about the world, and good writers often write what they know.
That doesn't mean you shouldn't write characters of color. Please, please don't be afraid to do so. Just because some topics are better suited for others to tell does not mean that your stories don't deserve a diverse world.
Are you sure that's what you're trying to say? Because it sounds to me like you just told people not to write about people of colour, at least not in any way that makes them interesting or engaging characters. I really don't think you know what you want. I think you're a young thing that has gone through life being told that you're under some nebulous oppression that actually isn't really there. Not in the way you've been taught to see it. That somehow, regardless of the reality of the situation, white folks have it better than you. But anybody that has lived a very similar life to you will have damn near the same kinds of experiences and will be able to tell stories just like yours. Because they're stories about people like them. Any poor person can relate to any other poor person very easily. By and large, that is what defines the struggles people face. We could probably tell each other's stories quite well, as it were. Well, you are better off than me because you've not been properly homeless and you're prettier than me. Check your pretty privilege, scum. I'm done with this video. I'll see you all later. Bye!